Let me go ahead and open up here and we'll get started with some different types of black and white images. I'm mostly going to be taking images that I have already edited, and I'll show you what that looks like. But these are images that are just been initially edited for color. And every good black and white should actually start as a color photo these days, is my belief. I like to start with a nice rich image to begin with. So let's start right here. We'll take a nice landscape and bring that in. All right, so first off, as you guys are probably familiar, auto radiant will kick in, or the type of recognition will kick in to try to maximize the dynamic range right away. That's what radiant's going to do on its own. It will detect that there is an image and try to maximize that. So if we take a look over here under detailed edit and open up the histogram, you're going to notice that basically the full dynamic range from white to black has been mapped. Now, what you want to do before you do the black and white conversion is to try to achieve that full black and white mapping. If you notice, for example, that you have some clipped pixels, that's what these are here. Red indicates clipped pixels, whites that are too hot, and blue indicates crushed pixels that are too hot. You can use the white point and black point slider. And you'll notice as I move that, hopefully, the histogram taking shape, this just pulls that in a little bit. And later on, we'll use the finishing tools for this, but this is an initial step up here. And that's just going to do a nice job of recovering black and white point so that you've got a solid starting point to begin with. Then what I would suggest is you look at the overall tonal range. So there's some things you could do to really extend the dynamic range, in this case being the difference between the lightest and the darkest elements. Depth is going to do a nice job there, and especially if you choose the contrast method. So depth plus contrast is going to try to maximize that dynamic range. Additionally, the Smart Editing Strength slider will also push the tone a little bit further, and you can see that we've really pushed the difference here between the lightest and darkest areas. Once I've got tone in the right ballpark, you can play a little bit with super contrast. This is going to keep pushing those colors out, but you'll notice if you go too far, it's going to start to introduce some clipping, which I'd stay away from for right now. Beyond that, we'll come back to color, but after we do our black and white conversion. So for the black and white conversion, you're going to want to come on over to the color grading section and take a look at whatever black and whites you have loaded. Now, a lot of you may have some of these loaded. I've got most of our looks loaded here, but there's lots of different choices. I'm going to come here into the black and white landscapes category. And the reason why these are specific for landscape versus, say, the portrait ones is that they're keyed to be optimized to the colors blue and green. Blue for sky, green for most vegetation. And so these are different recipes where the blues are mixed at a different value. So you can see as you try these out how they produce very different results, but they're all thematically aimed at landscapes, given the type of dynamic range and which parts they tend to emphasize. So you can see different ways that the reds and the blues and the greens are being emphasized here. I think I like this one here. Now, I'm not going to initially worry about the clipping. I'm going to turn that off for now and just look at the image itself and evaluate how it's coming along. Once I've done that, I can come back to the detailed edit category and take a look at the color section. Remember, it is the color value that's actually pushing things. So if you start to increase the intensity of color using things like vibrancy, you'll see that that really starts to push the color in the black and white conversion. And if we were to turn the color grade off, it would look really obnoxious because the colors would be so rich and over the top. But that's okay, because since we're doing the black and white conversion, we're not seeing those oversaturated values. Rather, those really intense colors are pushing the LUT here, the lookup table, and how it's doing its different types of conversion, what that looks like. Additionally, If you want to emphasize something like the sky, I'd come down to the sky toning section. And there are different recipes here aimed at the sky, and you could bump those up a little bit. So you could try out the different types here and see which one is going to latch into your sky, and then toggle that on and off, and you'll see what sort of effect that toning is having. And depending upon the color that you're boosting, you'll see it take a different type of effect. So here, I'm going to go with something pretty simple, the blue sky cerulean, and let's take the tint correction off. So what that's doing is just boosting the amount of blue in the sky, and that's creating a nice overall transformation. Okay, cool. Now, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to just share some different techniques here as we're going. Also, you'll notice that we have foliage toning. Goldenrod and mahogany is currently active. This is targeting the colors themselves. So this is going to go after the golden colors, but you can also push those there, and you'll see different shades of green and different shades of brown. And so this will let you boost the colors in those zones, so you can add a little bit of interest into the green and the reds and how those are converting. All right, once you've got this in the ballpark, I'll come back to color grading and jump on over to the graduated filter. This tool is one that a lot of people don't fully understand. I want to kind of walk you through it. There's two main styles, a radial one, which is circular in shape, and a linear gradient, which lets you adjust the top and the bottom of the photo separately. I'm going to go with the linear gradient here and click to place my center and kind of move that to about where the natural skyline would be. So you can nudge that around and decide where it goes. I put it right there. Then take a look at these here. So as you adjust the size and the feather, you'll kind of see what's happening. So with no feather, the red zone is the top, the blue zone is the bottom. So if I look at the bottom controls here, I'm just going to turn those off for right now. I don't want to do any sort of manipulation on the bottom of the photo. I just want to work on the sky for right now. So now I'll look at the top, and I can, for example, pull down the sky, making it a little darker. Now it's really dark, but let's go just a little bit into there. Get the top edge nice and rich, and then put a little bit more contrast in there and recover some of the highlight details to bring out the clouds nicely. Now it's really simple. This is where the size comes into play. So the size is going to be the gap between the top and bottom, and then the feather is going to be the transition between those zones. So as I open up that gap a little bit, you're going to get a better cleared area, and you can see that that creates a nice transition downward, creating a darkening effect at the top to bring out the visual interest in the sky, but then transitions into an unedited bottom part of the image so you can really grade that. All right, let me know if that makes sense, and then I'm going to go to a totally different example, but I hope that you see how these tools can all work together for some nice color grading. Remember, once you've done this, feel free to save a preset. So you could choose to create your own group. I'm just going to call this custom black and white. Choose a name for the preset. So there's my group, and I'm just going to call this black and white landscape heavy. And you can give it a description if you want. When you click save, it's added over here to your presets group, and that's easy to reuse now in the future. So when you come to an image with just one click, you'll see that it does all those editings, including the gradient, with just a single click. So while it might take you a little bit of time to set this up, it's highly repeatable. Okay, let's bring in a couple more pictures, and let me know in the chat or the Q&A if this is making sense, or if you guys have any requests for styles today. I'll also find a portrait. I see a raised hand, so I'll try to unmute you. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull that off. And your hand went away. So I don't know where that went. So feel free just to put your question into the Q&A if you wouldn't mind typing. You seem to have disappeared from the list. So that's okay. All right, let's open up another image here. In this case, I'm going to take 2 and I'll drop those in. And while that's searching as well, I'm also going to go and quickly find a portrait image so we can take a look at a handful of black and white portraits today too. Okay, here I have a jellyfish. This is something I shot while diving. I've already edited the photo to kind of balance out the light a bit, and Radiant kicks in and does a little bit of refinement. So I did the initial develop for this inside of Adobe Camera Raw, and then now Radiant can take it just a bit further to really lift those details. In this case, this is a tricky image because we don't have a lot of color balance. Looking at the histogram, you can see what's going on here with the channels, right? So the red channel is pretty much slammed to the left here. There's almost no reds whatsoever. The green channel is way over here in the shadows, and the blue channel is over here in the highlights. Well, that's okay because that's kind of the reality here. We were shooting underwater. There's not a lot of red underwater. And even though I pushed this and developed it, there's only certain colors to work with. But this is going to make things a little bit tougher. Excuse me. It's going to make things just a little bit tougher when I go to do the black and white conversion. Okay, let's come on in and do something first, actually, before we do that conversion. So first up, if you take a look here in the dynamic range, I'm going to push the contrast a bit more. And that really starts to emphasize the different zones. Then on top of that, I'm going to diffuse the light. What that did is created a very bright, almost luminescent image. So light diffusion softens the light, and maximum super contrast sort of illuminates the light. It really pushes it. And then we'll go with definition here just to define the edges. And that's pretty strong. Now, looking at that, one thing I'm going to also do is come down here to details, and I'm going to turn sharpening off. That was because I'd already sharpened this image externally. Generally speaking, try to avoid triple or double sharpening. So if you've edited a picture elsewhere, and you've already sharpened, don't sharpen in Radiant until you get to the end if it's really needed. Okay, that's looking really good for the dynamic range. I love the shadows to highlight ratio there. So now I'll come into color grade and I'm going to audition things. Now, one of the things that I really like is that you get a great thumbnail of what every one of these images is going to look like before you apply it. So with a click, you can really see what that's going to do as you apply it to the image. And again, different LUTs are designed to emphasize different parts of the tonality. So what I'm looking for here is something that's going to really balance that blue to green ratio. And that's actually looking pretty nice there. I like how we really have things coming through well on the photo and pretty good separation. Remember, with every LUT, you have 3 controls. So strength is the intensity of the LUT. You can take it and slowly add it back in if you wanted a reduced chroma look, for example. Or you can go up to doubling the LUT, which really applies it effectively twice. So this way you can make things a bit stronger. We also can control how the saturation changes. Now on a black and white LUT, that doesn't really do much, but the contrast slider very much does. So in this case, I'm going to actually do something that might surprise you, and that is reduce the contrast for the black and white image. That's because I don't want it yet. I want to get a good balanced image that's visually interesting, but doesn't have too harsh of shadows. So looking at things here in both the tonal sliders, I'm going to actually take super contrast down a little bit and even that out, but use my depth bias here and target the brighter area just a little. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Got a good conversion. And now let's put a little bit of color contrast in. This is interesting because what color contrast is doing is pushing the richness of the black in the colors. All right, that feels good. Now what we can do is come on over and use the graduated filter. Place their center where you want to drive the eye for the subject. Now in this case, we're seeing a little bit of banding, so I'm going to feather that more and open up the size a little bit, and then just rotate the shape to match my object. There we go. Nice long shape, and rotate that. There we go. So it creates a bit of a halo. Now on the outside, just take that contrast down and balance that off. Just a gentle shift in the exposure, creating almost a feeling of light further moving through the scene on our subject. And I can take things like the highlights down or the shadow point down to create that transition. That's working nicely. So you can see that overall transformation as if it's going into a beam of light. So using that works out pretty well in your favor. Okay. All right, let's come here and then I'll do a portrait next. This is one of my favorite photos in my portfolio. I had a chance to photograph Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. And it was a very challenging shoot because I only had about a minute to photograph the subject. And that was because it was very rushed. They keep this thing literally in a morgue. So the type of thing that you would see on like a CSI show, they keep it temperature controlled at the Smithsonian Museum, the Air and Space Museum, so that things are not exposed to air. And that's because they want to keep things not subject to any sort of change or any variation. So they're using that to really kind of keep things under control. Okay. So then here, what we can do is this. We go in and open this up. Hold on. There we go. 1 second. Oops. Didn't mean for those to come up. There we go. So what I've got going on here with this transformation is we need to balance it out. So in this case, I'm going to come over and switch to one of the black and white presets. Now, there's a lot of these built in. And so the orange ones are the ones that become pre-built. So I'm going to go into a category that almost nobody seems to comment on, which we had a sense of humor on, and that is our Radiant Cat category. This came out of a night with a few too many beers, but we were having fun with really pushing the creative options here. And so I just want you to notice how this is kind of leaning into different feelings. And so Tomcat is actually kind of an action hero, Tom Cruise type of thing, of really cool blues from like an action movie with rich shadows. And you can kind of see how it's pushing that. So that's a good starting point to kind of jump in there. Then what I'm going to do is come on over to our color grades and open those up. Now, looking at the black and white options, I'm just going to analyze what some of our choices are. So the analog looks also have some black and whites in there. So you're welcome to try those out. And so here's an example of that. But you notice that the strength is down. So as I bump that up back to 100, it starts to get to that clean black and white type look. As we audition these here, I can also explore others. So here's some of our black and white film stocks. Notice that some of these are really designed to push the white point. So you want to be careful if you have a very strong white object. Rich black and white here, I really like. This has a very gentle feeling. Or the warm black and white introduces just a small feeling, just a hint of brown, so that the blacks are not pure black, rather they have a little bit of an organic feeling to them. Now that I've done that, I'm going to come back to detailed edit. And let's break this down. As we continue to put more contrast in, you see how that starts to take really nice shape with the shadows. Light diffusion is going to soften the shadows in this case And then we can go with maximum contrast here. As we do that, look at how the texture starts to come to life. Now, as you're working with this, remember you have a lot of options, even under the color section, that will work. As we push the colors, this is going to introduce more shift in the black and white. And so I really like having the richer, vibrant colors there because it's actually bringing out things like the patches here and the chrome. Okay. Now, as we roll down, let's take a look at the details. I'm going to increase the amount of sharpening here, but in order to judge that accurately, I always recommend you zoom to 100%. Any sharpening you do should be done at 100% so you can judge the effects of the texture. So now, as I increase the radius, you see that the amount of sharpening gets more aggressive, and I love how the texture there of the fabric is really coming through. Threshold creates a fall off point. So as you increase threshold, you see it starts to ignore areas. So I'm going to keep that pretty low. And I'm actually going to take noise reduction off for a second so you can see the change. You want to be careful. Noise was definitely detected in this image, especially as we start to really push it. So a little bit of noise reduction could be helpful, but I'm going to tell it to preserve the details so those aren't lost. And now I really love the feeling of the fabric, the folds, the rivets, etc. Just that texture as you're seeing it. Now, under the color grading section, the last section here is quite useful. In this case, we have been using a vignette. It was a part of the preset. So if I start to look at that shape, I can see what's happening. Well, I'm going to change that a little bit. Instead of these falling off into the dark, I'm going to move those down and place this just a little lower. That way, these aren't in the shadows. And now I can take the feather down for a second so I could really see that shape. My suggestion is play with that shape and then really rotate it to match your object. Figure out where you want things to be in focus or in the object itself and where the shadows begin. Then go back and feather it. And that will create that fall off zone. So here, I wanted his name to really have the eye drawn to it. That's why I have this brighter zone that pulls you into it and does a nice job. But up here, it just falls off into shadows, and the bottom corner does too. That ability to really visualize the vignette is unique to Radiant, and I hope you guys have started to explore how useful that is with this graduated filter. Additionally, below that, you have some additional finishing tools. This is where it is now time to turn on the histogram and look at things. So for example, I see that I'm crushing the whites. Those red pixels indicate blown out whites. So what we're going to do is recover a little bit of that and pull it back in. So if I lower the white point just slightly, that's going to start to recover some of those and help. I can also come up to the detailed edit tab and lower the white point there for a little bit of black point and white point recovery. There we go. And that does a nice job of keeping some of those from becoming totally crushed. Now, this is going nice. It feels good. Let's just do a little bit of highlight recovery. And let's take the shadows up just a little bit. Good. Feels pretty good. We'll keep some of those whites in there. Just a little bit of pushed pixels is okay. It's okay to have some blacks. That's looking pretty good. And I like where that's going. And I'm just going to put just a touch more contrast in. And let's turn off the finishing tools. There we go. I like where that came. So you can see there how you get that extra pass. You could basically do 3 passes on your white and black point to really finesse things. Okay, I'm going to go on to a portrait next, but if you guys have any questions, please let me know. I hope that this is helping you really see how to put these together and that it's making sense. So let me know in the chat or Q&A how this is doing for you. And I will open up a portrait just to bring that in. So let me just get one here. There we go. Actually, let's do a bird shot for a moment. This will be fun. So I'll drop it in. And let's grab this one as well. Actually, this one will be better. All right, let's do this guy. So sometimes you're going to have a subject that's super lush, lots of detail, lots of color, and you really want to pull that in. And then I also have a portrait, and we'll do that one next. There we go. Perfect. Okay. When you've got a really dominant color here, like the red, it's important that you evaluate which color you're going to emphasize. So we'll start right away here, and I'm going to come in to the detailed edit and take a look at what's happening. Let's just turn everything down for a moment and build this one up completely from scratch. So there we go. Basically, everything is off right now. There's no change. So the strength slider is going after the dynamic range. So you can see there, as we lifted that, that filled in some of the shadows. Sometimes you're going to want to leave those mostly alone, because with black and white, we often like the shadows. So I'm going to lower that. Color is going to get the color issues resolved in the image and really push the saturation to maximum value, which we have in here already. So now let's look at tone. I'm going to take depth up, and what that did was really pop the shadows there. Notice how depth increased and recovered some of the shadow points, really filling in the black area there for richer shadows, which I like. And then we have skin versus depth bias. So this is going to favor skin on the left or shadows on the right. So there, I really pushed it, and you can see that there's different options as you play, but how it's going to emphasize different things. So I actually like that there. I feel that that's really rich and interesting shadows. And let's just lower the white point a little bit. So now we've got a nice, rich, shadowy image that's well suited for the black and white conversion. Come on in, and let's take a look here at the different black and white film stocks. So I'm going to go with a contrasty type look. And what I'm trying to do is find one that actually looks pretty nice there. Notice you have to get the right balance where different parts of the black and white image are being emphasized. Now, in the future, we're going to add a HSL type tool for doing targeted color grading on the reds, oranges, greens, etc. So that's a tool we're developing right now. It's going to let you actually select a color and then transform its HSL values, as well as expand the color selection and really visualize it so you can target specific zones. So that's something we're hoping to bring to market just a little bit later this year. It's in design right now, and then it'll go into development next. But I like where this went. And as I play with the contrast here, look at how that really brings out those shadows. That's feeling good. Nice and rich. Now, in this case, I'm pretty happy with that transformation, but we can still use the finishing tools here and do an extra pass. So putting in a little bit more contrast and a little more highlight recovery, just balance that out so that we have a good gray value here instead of blown out whites. And the shadows are actually getting just a touch cluttered. So I'll lift those just a bit, and that's really solid. Then stylistically, let's just use a preset here, and we'll choose the light portrait vignette. And with a simple blend slider, I could just roll that back so it's a nice gentle curve on the edges rather than being over the top. Okay, so here's our progress so far. That's working nicely. We're going to go on to a portrait example next. But you guys are being pretty quiet today, so either this is making sense or you're all kind of tired from the winter, but hopefully this is okay for you. Let's go in and tweak a portrait. So first up, the Smart preset should recognize this as a person. Good job, Smart preset. And I'm going to do a little bit of editing on the person before we go past it. So in this case, I want to touch up a few details on the person, and I'm going to zoom in to 100% to look at the face. Okay. You can see the face has been detected automatically. If it wasn't, you can click manually add face. Additionally, you could see the points that it's recognized. Now, these don't have a specific position. Some people think they go over the pupil, but they don't. What they do is they affect your adjustments. So for example, I'm going to take out dark circles here and toggle that on and off. So you can see the dark circles under his eyes. Now watch as I move this dot. It's going to gently refine that dark circle. So you can use this here to control how those adjustments are being applied. And let's just do a little bit of additional eye enhance there to really sharpen the eyes and bring out some of the details. So if we look at that there, and I'll turn the dots off now, you can see the before and after with the space bar. And that little adjustment on the eyes really did a good job here. Whether you're doing black or white or not, just being able to pop the eyes works out quite well here. Now, when I say pop the eyes, I did not enlarge the eyes. I don't mean that type of popping of the eyes. This slider should be very, very, very gentle. It's kind of meant when someone is squinting in bright sunlight. In this case, a little value is okay. I don't need to go too far on it, but that just kind of opens them up a little bit. All right, I like that. Now let's look at the face. We don't need any shaping on the face here. There are no teeth. The lip sharpening, not really needed, but what it does there is you can see that it brings out the texture on the lips a little bit. And actually with the black and white, sometimes that could be a bit interesting. Then let's look at the skin. His skin is typical teenage challenged. So let's do just a bit of smoothing. And we'll do the subtle type of smoothing there and just bump that up slowly. And if we look at that, you can see that we still have a good clean shape, well-defined nose and nostrils, but some of those blemishes have been toned down. I'm going to go a little bit more subtle and instead use a little bit of blemish removal on that image. And so that's just done a nice job of evening out things a bit. Okay. Since he's outdoors, shine removal can also come in handy. You can see we got a little bit of hot spots here across the forehead and on the cheeks. So shine removal will target those zones and let you kind of matte them down, like matte makeup, powder, for example. All right, that looks good. Speaking of makeup, this one's going to be interesting. So one of the things I like to point out to people is sometimes, especially with the black and white, you might actually add this in. This is going to do skin toning. So you can choose the makeup, target the face, and then take a look at different colors. So in this case here, I'm going to push that a little bit. Notice how we brought out his skin with a bit of tanning. Now again, I'm doing this stronger so that I can affect the black and white. So just watch what I mean. Let's go into the color grade section and we're going to apply a black and white portrait adjustment. So here we go, black and white portraits. And there's different zones of these. Let's just zoom out. You'll see that it's targeting the skin tones and bringing those to life. And depending upon which one you choose, it'll have a different black point and a different point of where it emphasizes the skin. Now, I like some of these here where we have pretty good separation on the skin, but we haven't gone quite so far on the background. So I don't want a really dark black and white right now. So if I come back here to the portrait edit, watch what happens as I tone that skin. See, you can actually balance the face a bit or do the full body there if you need to get the neck and the rest of the skin in. So this could be really useful if you need to get some more separation on how the skin tones are being converted to black and white. You can use the skin toning makeup foundation to target the skin and push just the skin tones on the body with actual body detection and face detection here so that it can target those zones for a little bit more conversion. Then up here under color grade, you can start to work in the contrast of that black and white conversion there and the strength of the black and white conversion with how strong the LUT goes. That's nice. Then place your center point. I generally go for a portrait right between the eyes. And then let's just adjust that there. Get the body. Change the shape a little bit to match the body face. Rotate it. And then you can use that to just gently start to lighten or darken. And here's the cool thing. When you pull that down, remember, you have separate control over highlights and shadows. So if I don't want the highlights to get darker, like I don't want the snow here to change color, but I do want the shadows to get darker, I can use independent sliders there to pull the shadows and highlights up or down on their own so they don't get shifted. So this way, only the darks in the vignette were manipulated and we weren't affecting the whites so it doesn't look like a fake vignette. That way, we're just pulling down the dark edges to really pull it in for him. Okay, there we go. All right, now, whenever you do work like this, I do encourage you to think about saving your presets because you can always come back to them. Remember, you can make your own group, right? Custom black and white. And I'm just going to call this portrait. 1, save preset, put that in there, custom black and white. Let me just find it. There we go. Animals. See, it stored it. And let's save a preset, custom black and white. And I'll call this newspaper. There we go. And save. All right. Why don't you guys toss in a request if there's a type of image you want? Otherwise, I've got a few other ones that I can show, but if there's a style you want. And remember, these are super simple. With just a click, you can audition those different options there, and you see how different they look, right? We can use different styles here on these images with just a click, and it's really easy to audition them and try them out. Okay, let's go on and do, I think I got a good waterfall here. Yep, that looks nice. Let's bring that in. And let's do, that's a good one. And let's do a flower here. Nice high contrast. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to do a little bit of manipulation on this before we do the conversion again. So remember, your quick edit is going to be pretty much the basics. Look at how much it balanced out that image, which is great. I love that it was able to recover those shadows. I don't want to go quite as aggressive though. So I want a little bit of shadows in there. So I'm going to actually lower the strength, but push the color. And then nice, rich depth. That's working well. Now, what I want to do is bring out the sky a bit. So using my color grade here, I'm going to go into the sky. Let's see here. There are 2 questions. What about working with old digitized black and white photos? Sure, I can do one of those too. Not a problem. Let me grab one. Let me finish this one and then I'll do that. And then let me translate the French real quick so I can, because it's been a long time since I've had French class. So let me put this in here and just do a quick translation so I can see what you were asking as well and see what we got. No questions. Okay, perfect. So, but I will do the black and white next. So as we go in here, sky toning is going to be helpful. So this is going to allow me to target the color of the sky. Now, if the sky is reflected in the water like it is here, you might notice there how it starts to affect more of the landscape, but that's okay. Then here with the foliage toning, I'm going to target things like the greens and I can bring those out. And then here's the brown rocks with the mahogany, burnt sienna, etc. You could actually target those. Then you have your corrective filters. This is where you can introduce an overall color cast, such as warming or cooling, into the scene. Now, in this case, that might sound strange. Why would I warm the scene? But this isn't actually about the colors of the scene. This is about getting some interest there up in the sky. And I like how that's really bringing that sky to life with good texture. And as I bring the contrast in here, that's looking pretty interesting. Yeah, I feel good about that. We've got nice, clean separation. Now we'll come on in and do our base color grade. So as I look at these here, different ones are going to transform things a bit differently. Some of these are tritones, where it's using one color for the highlights and one color for the shadows. So this is kind of a split color warmth approach, or a split toning, where we're using a shade in the shadows and a shade in the highlights, which can be very visually interesting. As we come down through here, let's take a look at some of these. That's not bad. And you're just auditioning ones until you find something that gets you in the ballpark of the feeling you're going for. Now, I actually like some of these earlier ones, so I'm going to come back here to black and white film. Contrast, sepia tone. I think I like the filmic black and white, actually. Although, that's actually nice, warm black and white. Good. So now, this is going to play with the intensity of the color transformation. So if I don't want that to feel so brown, I can reduce the warmth of the black and white, but increase the contrast there or decrease. So look, as you're doing this conversion, you can balance that until you're seeing the type of transformation where it feels like it's in the right zone. There we go. Then on top of that, do a global transformation on contrast, which is going to affect the total image itself for the contrast. And then I'll do an additional highlight recovery, and look at how it brings back that sky, right? See, by targeting that there, it really did a nice job of getting some of the sky back in and creating interest. Let's also put the graduated filter there in place. So we'll come in here and do, let's look at that there. I'm going to go on the inside here and do more highlight recovery. There we go. It targets the water nicely. And you're saying, how do you know inside versus outside? Well, look at the size there, right? I'm going to put this right on the waterfall. There we go. So now I'm using one shape on the waterfall. And so let's adjust the shape there. There we go. And the size and the rotation to match the waterfall a little bit. Now, what I'm doing is tweaking just the waterfall. I can brighten the waterfall, for example. There we go. Put a little bit more contrast into the waterfall. I like that. And recover more of the highlights to bring that to life. Then on the outside here, that's affecting everything outside of the waterfall. That's where I'm getting these nice shadows here and bringing back the sky. So you can see how by using that graduated filter, you can really target different parts of the image nicely. And so that is kind of a fun way to bring that in. And then with my finishing tools here, let's recover more of those highlights to bring back the sky and do a little bit of a global pass on shadows just to fill those in. There we go. That's nice. And so I really like where that came to life there. So the key here is to realize that Radiant is giving you sometimes 3 or 4 passes on the shadows and highlights and the white point. And so depending upon which stage you introduce this in, it has very different effects. First is the initial color photograph, getting the balance right. Then you have the ability to do this in the LUT or color grade conversion as well, affect the contrast. Then using the graduated filter, you can target things like top, middle, and bottom, or a center point in the area around it. And then you can do a final pass here just to really even things out. And so if I put those side by side, that's a nice transformation. I see people doing things like sky replacement all the time, and I say, why? Like, it's often not needed. There's usually beauty in the sky there. You just have to recover it and bring it out a little bit. Okay. All right. There was a request here for old photos. So I'm going to go in and pull out a scan really quick. Let me just open up. And I'm just jumping into Mylio Photos for a second. And I have a folder here called Scans. And let me go into some old pictures. Here we go. This should be fun. All right. Do we want to do a color one or a black and white one? You want to take an old black and white photo and convert that, I'm assuming? It looks like you say digitize black and white. Sure. Let's do that. This should be a good one for that. This is my grandfather on my father's side. So I'm just going to send this on over, photo open with, and radiant photo. And that will hand it off. I'm going to edit a copy here with Mylio adjustments in 16-bit. And that will just make a new file and pass it on to Radiant. There we go. All right. Notice already Radiant's helped. This is the original. This is the Radiant image. So Radiant can do that. And there's a reason why we have a black and white image preset. So that's because we can enhance black and whites. Notice there how it's recovered a lot of the contrast nicely. Don't be afraid to play with this a little bit. So smart editing is not pushing the color very much, but light diffusion is going to work well and really start to push the depth or the contrast. I like contrast here. That's nice. Now, what I'm going to do is play with the amount of contrast until I feel like it's a nice, rich photo. That's working pretty well for me. Let's look at the bias here, and I'll do normal versus bright. I actually like normal, richer shadows. That feels good. Now, you might wonder, why would you use color contrast? Because there's no color. But what it's doing is it's targeting the black point, and a value of 1, this is very strange, so pay attention, is there's two things. There's color contrast from 2 to 200, and then there's color contrast 1. Color contrast 1 is its own special recipe. And you can see there that it did a nice job. So that's one of those little hidden things in Radiant, is that color contrast 1 is its own method. And that's why you'll sometimes see it applied as a value of 1 in some of the presets. We're trying to figure out how to expose that in the user interface, but basically it's like color contrast 0 is off. Color contrast 1 is method 1, and then 2 through 200 is method 2 with the strength slider. I know that probably made no sense whatsoever, but it's actually kind of cool. So I hope you can use that okay. All right, so let's go ahead here and finesse it now a little bit. Looking at that, I think we're in good shape. There's no tint here, not worried about it. Under details, you might get a little bit more aggressive with sharpening here. So if you look at older photos, sharpening can often help. Look at how it's picking up on some of those edges, but play with the radius and the threshold. You don't want to go too aggressive, and you want a little bit of fall off so that, you know, some of the scratches and things don't get pushed too far. And then noise may not work, but if you need to force it, you could push it to strongest and then use just a little bit of noise, but bump up the details there. And so you can try different methods here. And sometimes that will help. This is one of those tough images there where it's pretty much going to stay. That's the sort of thing that you'd probably want to clean up with your scanner when you scanned it. They have some healing technology on most scanners, but that's not bad. All right, let's lean into this now. I'm going to come over to color grade and use some of the black and white looks. In this case, the different film stocks are going to be fun. So let's zoom out, see the whole image. And different styles here are going to further push into that. And then by using the strength slider and the global contrast slider, you can really finesse it. That's looking pretty good. I like that. And I'll just do one more pass I'm going to lower those highlights a little bit and lift the shadows. There we go. So I think we got some good separation there. I love how the shadow on the ground is coming out now. And if we put that side by side, you can see how we were able to restore some of those details and bring that back to life. Now, I'm going to give you a bonus tip here, and this involves a website really quick. If I can get this one right, IMG fan. Let me see if I can find this here. There's a really cool old website that is able to take really old scans, if I could spell it right. Here we go. And not Remni, these are fine, but there's an actual interesting open source tech. I'm just trying to remember how to spell it, of course, because let's see here, old photo, open source. Let's find it. Here we go, GFP GAN. That's the one I was looking for, GFP GAN. So GFP GAN is a tool designed to up-res and sharpen old photos, okay? So it's a website, and what you want to do is go to GFP GAN, okay? So here we go. Let's open that up now that we know the name, GFP GAN. And you're going to go, and they have a, let me find it here, GitHub. Perfect. That should do it. So GitHub is where the code is. And then they have like a project and other things. You can kind of see where it lives, and they'll have information. So here it is. Here's the website, right? So here's a demo, okay? And then here's another one here, online demo. Perfect. Okay, so what we're gonna do is load the picture into here and let it optimize the image. So let's take that one that I just made over here before. I'm just gonna reveal that in the Finder here really quick, reveal in Finder, and drop that into this and let it enhance. So here we go, input. It's gonna analyze, and I'm gonna tell it to go ahead and do a 4x scale, and I'll click submit. What it does now is this is using AI, and it's going to attempt to improve the image and scale it up. So now let's download that, allow, and bring that one into Radiant. There we go. This is the enhanced image. Look at how much sharper that is there, right? So here, let's look at the original image, right? And then here's the AI enhanced image that it regenerated. So I'm trying to, let me stop doing the split screen here. Zoom, there's the face versus here. So I think you guys can hopefully see the transformation there between the two, right? So nice improvement. But let's go ahead and sync forward the edits we made. There we go. So now if I look at that side by side, you see that Radiant continued to enhance the dynamic range, but with the old photo being enhanced by GFP GAN ahead of time, it did a nice job of really bringing out some of those details. Plus the image is significantly larger. So let's go ahead and save this one, and I'll put it next to the original. And then I'm going to save this one. There we go. And I'll save it next to the original as well. Good, close. So now let's take a look at those two. All right, here we go. So this is the different stages, right? So there's the Radiant one, and here's the coming out of GFP GAN. So Radiant did a nice job of getting the shadows nice and rich and recovering some of those lost details. And then if we combine that with where the images themselves started, let's just put these into here, paste. Now let's compare it. So where we began and where we ended, spacebar. Okay. Here's the original photo. This is the original unprocessed image. You can see the softness to it and everything else. Here's the GFP GAN technology with the radiant technology. And so you can see a higher quality image with richer depth. So anonymous attendee, I can't see your name, but does that give you an idea of a couple of ways of enhancing really old photos? Two pieces of tech, and GFP GAN is free. It's open source tech. So it's something we're looking at trying to work in the future as well, but it's pretty cool tech that's now on version 1.4. So it's an interesting emerging field of technology in the AI generative image stuff. It uses an original photo, but then generates a new photo based on that photo and tries to enhance and bring out detail. All right, let me know what you guys think about that in the chat. If it's just too weird that we can enhance old photos that way. I'm gonna do one more though while you're thinking about it. So let me just show you where we were. So let's exit here. I'm going to do one more old photo, then we'll clean it. So this is a picture of my father from 1960. Let's bring that in there and drop it. And we'll just drop that picture in. And oh, that's version 1.2. Let's go 1.4. This is the newer one. Come on. There we go. Clear that one out and drop in the new photo and submit. We'll let that analyze and download now. And let me put those two side by side. There we go. So we'll bring both into Radiant so you can see them. And here's the newer one. All right, so here's the original. This is the non-GFP GAN version. And here's the GFP GAN version. Now, interestingly, it did a little bit of colorization. Sometimes they try to do that. I'm going to avoid that here. And I'll do that by just going back to a nice, clean black and white. And so I'm going to go with one of the more filmic black and whites here. Let's go nice, warm black and white. That feels good. And now looking at that, play with the contrast. I'm going to take that down just a little bit, a little less saturation. There we go. And then come into the original here and just play with the contrast. That's not bad. And a little more depth. That feels good. There we go. So there is your enhanced black and white. So we went from here, sort of fuzzy, water stain detail, to here. And that's one of the benefits of applying the clean stuff is it kind of evens all of that out. And you can see the improved image there brought back to life a little bit. Okay. All right, let's do that last example and then we'll call it a day. So in this case here, I've got a really rich landscape image. So one of the things I want to point out is that purples and blues struggle to look real. So one piece of technology we have in Radiant is called Fidelity, and it's designed to handle purples, blues, and greens so they don't get artificially boosted. Even under Vivid, it's still going to do a pretty nice job. So in this case here, I'm going to turn the vibrancy off and instead just work on color contrast and fidelity. And that really evens things out before we do the conversion. Then with the foliage toning, I can lean into the conversion here on the green. And I'm going to go with the dark forest green there with just a really low value and set that to none. So now we've got nicer separation, and I like how these have a little bit more life to them. Looking up here, we'll continue to put a little more contrast in and depth. And that feels good. Now we're ready for the conversion. And I'm just auditioning different recipes to see which one is going to put the tones where I want. Notice how they all behave very differently. I actually like these here. I like this contrast, but I'm going to take the contrast down so it's not so intense, and then the strength up. There we go. Good conversion. Start to reintroduce the contrast, and then perfect time for the graduated filter. Place the center on the object, adjust your shape to cover the object that you want and the transition. There we go. That's what we're looking to keep into place. And then on the outside here, I'm just going to pull the shadows down, but not touch the exposure as much. Notice here, I don't want to just darken everything because then that looks really fake. But by just darkening the exposure a little bit and pulling down the shadows while leaving the highlights alone, we still have those bright highlights back there. On the inside here, I'm going to increase the contrast to really pop the different parts of that flower. That looks nice. And then lower the black point there on the inside. And then play with the highlight point. There we go. So by being able to target the inside and outside separately, we could really do a nice global conversion, and that feels solid. So just a couple things to think about. I hope you see that the graduated filter is really your friend here. Remember, once you've got that in place, you're still free at the very end to play with global black and white points. This will let you really pay attention to what's happening here. And so, for example, if you see too much clipping, you can use this to recover anything that was going to get blown out and dial that in a bit. And then play with the pure black point. In this case, I want a little bit less. I don't mind it at the edges, but I'm going to back that off just a little. There we go. And look at my overall clipping. I feel pretty good about it now. All right, there you go. Well, thank you guys for coming out today.